Perhaps you'll feel more comfortable at the nearby Marriott. A sentence as light as a feather. Yet it landed like a velvet-wrapped baseball bat striking the unarmored part of a warrior long accustomed to navigating the desert of high-stakes commerce. Julian Vance didn't reply. He stood still right in the middle of the hotel lobby that looked like a palace just to feel the gaze. The space around him seemed frozen, not by temperature, but by the chill of the looks cast in his direction. Eyes rising like calm waves before crashing into an invisible wall of judgment. Whispers soft enough to seem polite yet sharp enough to slice through the air like razors scraping glass. Outside, the New York night sliced through skin with its cold. Inside, warmth had been disinfected of compassion. The celestial spire, heaven's pinnacle. A place designed to make you feel small unless you wore the symbols of status, a Patek, watch a Hermès, bag a voice trained by Ivy League institutions. Julian brought something else. He wore a light gray cashmere sweater, no logos. A classic leather coat, matte finish lace-up boots. Nothing flashy. But each item carried a story, carried weight, just like him. As he entered the lobby, memories arrived uninvited. Age 15 followed more closely than the security cameras at a Louis Vuitton store. Age 22, his professor asked repeatedly whether he truly wrote that scholarship essay. Age 29, in a boardroom full of white executives, he shared an idea, and silence killed it. The stares, the silent headshakes, the rejections were dressed in courtesy. And now he'd walked straight into the heart of it, not out of curiosity, but because he needed to remember the pain with razor clarity. If I forget why I began, I'll lose my way. Standing before him, Eleanor Croft, hotel manager, hair pinned tight, a silver gray tailored suit, a voice like aged whiskey, smooth but liable to burn if swallowed wrong. She didn't ask for his name, didn't check the system. She simply looked, from head to toe, unapologetically. The gaze of someone trained from birth to judge by shoes, watches, and skin tone. "Good evening, sir." Her voice wasn't loud, but each word stitched like a needle to skin. "I'm afraid we're fully booked. Perhaps the Marriott support team nearby would better suit your needs." No raised eyebrows, no gasps. Here insult was wrapped in silk, and silk doesn't tear. Julian blinked once. No arched brows, no tensed shoulders. He simply placed a black credit card on the counter. "I have a reservation under Vance Enterprises." His voice was low, calm. Not confrontational, but not asking either. Eleanor gave a slight smile. The smile of a woman who used to run the world with a tilt of her head. "There must be some mistake. Marcus, would you escort our guest? Outside, please, he seems to be lost." Marcus Thorne stepped forward. Broad shoulders, steady eyes. A former soldier no longer surprised by the world's nonsense. But this time something felt off. The man wasn't angry, didn't resist, didn't raise his voice. He simply stood like an iron tower, eyes deeper and colder than the New York night outside. Marcus glanced at Eleanor, then back at Julian. A small nod. Orders were orders. "Sir, if you'll come with me." Julian tilted his head slightly, said nothing, just walked. Each footstep echoed on the marble floor like war drums at an execution. The guests in the lobby kept sipping wine, but their eyes followed him like they were watching a news segment, just spicy enough to distract them from their martinis. As the revolving doors opened, icy wind rushed in. Marcus walked beside him. Didn't touch Julian, didn't have to. Julian wasn't being pushed. He walked out like it was his choice. And then at the threshold, two gazes met. Julian looked at Marcus, not with anger, with sorrow, a sorrow thick as smoke, rising from the depths of disappointed hope. Marcus, who had once escorted criminals, agitators, even heads of state, had never felt smaller than he did now. A seed was planted, in a look, on a freezing night, at the heart of a gold-plated paradise. Cold. Julian stood on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue where the wind sliced across his face like a sharpened weapon. His breath turned into white mist, right hand still in his coat pocket. Left hand pulled out his phone. No hesitation, no sigh, no words to Marcus, just action. One tap. Amara, begin. The voice on the other end was clear, decisive. Termination documents are ready. Violation of the Equality Clause. I'll send it in 5 minutes. Another tap. David. In 10 minutes, I want both Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal to know the Celestial Spire now belongs to Vance Enterprises. David Chen, Chief Financial Officer, responded without a beat. Press release is in progress. Headline: Redefining Luxury, Reshaping Power. One final tap. Dr. Miller. I just walked through some old memories. I need a session tomorrow morning. His voice softened. For the first time that evening, Julian let a sliver of emotion slip through. I'm okay, but I need to talk. The call ended. The phone slid back into his pocket. He looked up, eyes sharp as blades yet deep inside. Weary. Being strong is sometimes the loneliest job in the world. Inside, the Celestial Spire. Eleanor Croft raised a glass of Veuve Clicquot champagne, smiling lightly at a circle of elite guests. Not everyone is a fit for this space. We have to maintain the standard. A diamond-laden lady nodded approvingly. You have such discernment. So many just don't understand the level expected here. Soft laughter followed. The hotel lobby remained luxurious, warm, and hushed like a cathedral. But the fire had been lit outside, and it was creeping in. A young man in a slim-fit suit suddenly froze, eyes fixed on his phone. What the hell? His finger trembled. Vance Enterprises acquired the entire Croft International hotel chain. Official announcement. The news spread like wildfire. Another guest gasped. Mrs. Croft. Look at this. On Bloomberg, right now. Eleanor gripped her glass tighter. Her chin held high, but her eye twitched. The revolving door opened once more. Julian Vance stepped in. Unhurried, wordless, no longer subject to anything. He was the storm foretold. No one spoke. Every gaze, once coated in doubt, now stared with reverence. Marcus Thorne was the first to hear the ping from his secure phone. A message from headquarters. Ownership transfer confirmed. New CEO Julian Vance. Effective immediately. Croft terminated. Signed Amara Singh. Marcus turned pale. He walked toward Eleanor and lowered his voice. Mrs. Croft. I'm afraid you need to speak with headquarters. Eleanor looked at Julian. Her mouth opened as if to protest. But no words came. Julian walked to the front desk. He didn't look at Eleanor. He looked at Marcus. You did your job. No apology necessary. He turned, faced Eleanor. His eyes held no anger. Only a calm, ruthless certainty, like a man who has seen the future and meets it without fear. Eleanor whispered, disbelieving, You can't own this place. Julian pulled out a sleek black business card, silver embossed. He placed it on the counter. Julian Vance, founder and CEO, Vance Enterprises. A shiver ran down her spine. That card lay between them like a verdict. Small, thin, but heavy enough to crush a legacy. Marcus, still beside them, clenched both fists. He repeated this time loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, he owns us. He owns everything. No one moved. A gentleman holding a wine glass set it down gently, almost in reverence. A young woman slowly put away her phone. She didn't want to record this moment. It was too real, too serious. Eleanor staggered. Her mouth opened, but no words came to protect the old world that had just collapsed overnight. Julian simply stood there, nothing more to say, because his silence now spoke louder than anything else in the room. No one left the lobby, not out of curiosity, but because something was happening, something bigger than a dismissal, deeper than a takeover. Julian Vance stood at the center, not of a hotel, but of a power structure decades in the making about to come undone. He pulled out a wireless earpiece, made a call. The large screen behind the reception desk instantly lit up with a video call from Amara Singh, Chief Legal Officer of Vance Enterprises. A woman of color in a white tailored suit, face sharp as a scalpel. "Good evening," Amara's voice rang through the speakers. "No pleasantries. I'm speaking from our Manhattan South office with the full legal file in front of me." Eleanor stood stiffly beside the desk. No one looked at her as a leader anymore. They saw her as a crumbling wall. Amara opened a folder, read each word with clarity. "Eleanor Croft, over the past 2 years, we've received 17 formal complaints from employees, guests, and vendors citing systemic discriminatory behavior under your leadership. All files previously suppressed by the former board under NDA clauses. However, under the merger agreement, all such NDAs are now the legal property of Vance Enterprises." A sharp breath came from a corner of the room. Amara paused, then continued, cold as a death sentence. "We are terminating Mrs. Croft's employment effective immediately. Gross violation of human rights policies. We will also cooperate with federal authorities if an investigation is opened." The screen went dark. What remained was silence heavy as lead. Julian didn't look at Eleanor. He turned to Marcus Thorne. The security officer stood by the side of the lobby, quiet, as if wrestling with himself. "Marcus," Julian said, without blame, simply as someone who wanted the truth, "what does your conscience say tonight?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked down at his shoes, the same boots that once stepped across Iraqi sands stood post for a president, and tonight followed the wrong command. A beat. A breath. "It says I was wrong, sir. I followed orders. But I knew your eyes back then. They weren't the eyes of a threat. They were the eyes of someone used to being misjudged," Julian nodded. Quietly. "Admission is the first step. I believe those who get it wrong but choose to get it right deserve a second chance. It wasn't charity. It was a principle." He turned, held up a file. "Not to dominate, but to educate. These are customer feedback numbers. Over the last 3 years, Black customers, LGBTQ+ guests, and non-native English speakers were denied rooms, accidentally misplaced, or given unnecessary difficulties at twice the normal rate. And here are the termination rates of minority employees within their first 90 days, 47% higher than the industry average." He didn't need to name names. Eleanor was a symptom. The system was the disease. Julian took a few steps down, walked toward the crowd. His eyes were no longer speaking to Eleanor, but to everyone in the lobby. "You've seen what happened tonight. But I ask again, what did you do while it was happening?" A pause. Some heads lowered. "You filmed not to protect, but to entertain. You laughed when I was escorted out, but now you're silent." A white couple exchanged a guilty glance. A young woman hurriedly put her phone away. Julian wasn't angry. He simply spoke as if tearing the velvet from the golden throne. Luxury cannot be built on someone else's humiliation. And power doesn't mean exclusion, it means restoration. He turned, looked back at Marcus. "Marcus, please escort Mrs. Croft out." No one laughed. No one clapped. Because true reckoning doesn't need applause, it needs awakening. Marcus stepped forward, placed a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. This time it wasn't a procedure. It was a shift in power. She tried to keep her spine straight. but her steps had lost their confidence. Eleanor Croft, who had expelled Julian less than an hour ago, was now being escorted out by the same loyal protector who once stood by her side. The revolving door opened again. Cold wind rushed in, and this time it wasn't Julian being swept out, but history being pushed back. 6 months later. Summer in New York carries a kind of heat that can't be measured in degrees. It's the kind of warmth that seeps into the skin not to discomfort but to awaken. It makes things that once seemed dead begin to bloom again, just like how the silence that once blanketed the celestial spire had finally been broken. On ABC7, a live interview was airing. The camera zoomed in on the face of a Dominican woman, early 30s, eyes strong but glistening. "I'm Maria Torres," she said. "I used to be a front desk clerk at the Celestial Spire. I was fired just because my voice didn't fit the brand image." Her voice caught in her throat. "The day they pushed me out the back door, not one person said a word. I went home and cried in front of my son. And I thought, dignity must be a luxury." The camera panned to her new name badge. Maria Torres, Assistant Manager, the Celestial Spire. "Vance Enterprises didn't just give me my job back," she said, as tears rolled down her cheeks. "They gave me back the feeling of being human." Viewers at home sat in silence. No background music was needed. Truth was loud enough. A modest conference room in Queens, rows of plastic chairs, no crystal chandeliers, no marble lobby, just people and a lesson worth passing on. Marcus Thorne stood before a group of hotel security staff from across New York, chest up, shoulders still broad. But his eyes no longer scanned. They searched deeper. On the screen behind him played a clip from that night. Julian is being escorted out. Eleanor smiling, Marcus was walking beside him in silence. He paused the video at the moment Julian looked at him, the gaze not of anger, but quiet disappointment. "That moment," Marcus said, "changed me. I realized that security isn't about protecting property. Security is about protecting human dignity, every human being." He turned to face the trainees. "If I had spoken up that night, I might have lost my job. But if I stayed silent forever, I would have lost myself." A young man in the class asked, "Have you forgiven yourself?" Marcus smiled gently. "No need for forgiveness. I use that mistake to do the right thing every day. That's how I make it right." The room broke into applause. Not because he was a hero, but because he was honest. A brightly lit boardroom in a midtown tower now sat empty. Julian Vance wasn't there. He was seated inside a small community center in the Bronx, where he'd grown up among cracked walls, the smell of chlorine, and government-funded free meals. In front of him sat a group of teenagers of color, natural-haired Jordans on their feet, eyes both curious and guarded. "You know," Julian began, "I used to sit in chairs just like these. Used to think, no one who looks like me becomes a CEO. Got kicked out of stores for looking suspicious. Got asked, 'You really go to Harvard?' Like they couldn't believe it." The kids were silent. One boy shyly raised his hand. "So how'd you still make it?" Julian smiled a smile marked by both blood and tears. "Because I knew one thing, they can laugh at your dream, but they can't steal it if you hold it tight." He pointed out the window toward the distant Manhattan skyline glowing like a hazy dream. "I built those towers, not so I could walk into them, but so that one day you can, not with your head down, not asking for permission, but as the owner. No music, no spotlight, just belief passed from a survivor to those about to enter the fight." A New York Times article published a week later read, "The Vance Effect: How One CEO Forced an Entire Industry to Look Inward." Every hotel in the Croft International chain underwent review. Hiring policies were rewritten. Those once forced to sign NDAs into silence were now invited to speak the truth. Discrimination complaints surged not because things were getting worse, but because people had started to believe that their voices would finally be heard. 2 years later, New York was still the same, loud, busy, at times unforgiving. But inside the celestial spire, something had changed. Forever. The hotel lobby still gleamed with luxury. The marble floors still shone, the baccarat chandeliers still sparkled like frozen crystal mid-air. But now it was no longer cold. There was laughter, the aroma of fresh coffee. Soft jazz music is playing from the bar's corner. There was life. An Asian family posed for photos beneath the iconic chandelier. A gay couple checked in hand, no longer needing to hide. A group of black business professionals sat in the lounge, laughing loudly, signing contracts without fear of scrutiny. An elderly man with a hearing aid was being patiently assisted by the front desk, and everyone was welcomed like a guest of honor without needing to qualify for respect. Maria Torres, now the lobby manager, greeted guests with the poise and presence she hadn't even dared to dream of 2 years ago. Welcome to the Celestial Spire, where everyone belongs. Her smile wasn't professional. It was real because she knew this place had been reborn with blood tears and hope. In a quiet corner of the lobby where afternoon light streamed through tall windows, Julian Vance sat sipping coffee. No bodyguards, no assistants, no posture of a billionaire CEO inspecting his empire. Just a man in a simple dress shirt watching the world go by. Marcus Thorne walked in no longer in a security uniform. He now served as the human rights policy advisor for the entire hotel chain. But today, he wasn't here for a meeting. "Good evening," Julian, Marcus said with a soft smile. "Everything's peaceful." Julian nodded. Peace is a priceless feeling, isn't it? They didn't talk about Eleanor, didn't talk about the past, because the most important thing had already been rewritten, not in the personnel files, but in the moral blueprint of an organization. After a brief handshake, Marcus left. Julian remained seated, looking around. And then he saw it. A small bronze plaque modestly mounted on the wall beside the front desk. No frame, no spotlight, just a few engraved lines. "This place once witnessed dignity denied and justice restored. May this space forever remind us that respect is a right, not a privilege." No signature, no date. Because true legacy doesn't need a name, it lives in how we treat one another every single day. Julian read it, said nothing. He simply sat there, one hand holding his cooled coffee, one hand resting over his chest right where Eleanor's cold gaze had pierced him 2 years earlier. He looked up. Through the towering windows, the golden sunset stretched like a carpet of light. In the distance, he saw the rooftops, the cracked walls, the place where he once was, the unwelcome child, the Bronx, home, wound, and root. Julian smiled, not a smile of victory, but the smile of a man who had completed the circle. He didn't need applause, he didn't need a statue, because true legacy isn't in what you build, it's in how you change the way someone feels when they walk into a place that once rejected them. And if luxury had once been a privilege for the few, now true luxury, the feeling of being seen, heard, and respected had become the standard. A soft bell chimed from the revolving door. A group of students entered, nervous and wide-eyed. A young front desk agent stepped forward with a smile. "Welcome to the Celestial Spire. It's our honor to serve you." Julian rose and left the lobby quietly, just as he had arrived. The revolving door closed behind him, no longer pushing him out like a stranger, but releasing him like a father who had just finished writing a letter to the future. Thank you for staying with this story until its final line. If this journey touched you even for a moment, a thought, a single tear, then that alone is the most precious gift. Please like if you believe this story is worth sharing. Subscribe to Story Precious so you won't miss the next story's raw slices of humanity, justice, and belief. And if you know someone who needs to hear this one, share it. Because sometimes just one story is enough to reignite the light in someone who's lost their way. See you in the next one. Story Precious, where every story is worth holding close.